Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is a US elections kind of special, almost a breaking news piece, although almost everyone in the world will have heard this news already, so it's not particularly that breaking anymore. I want to talk to you about the selection of Tim Walz as the vice presidential choice for Kamala Harris for her presidential bid. And as much information around this as I think is possible in the time frame, but also interesting for you looking at it from a number of different angles. I was not Tim Walz's biggest fan for the choice of vice president. And what I mean by that is I think the guy's a terrific human being. I think he's a really good governor of Minnesota. And I think he has achieved an awful lot. He's a man of action. He's very much a folksy kind of guy, but just to let you know who he is, he's a veteran, 24 years in National Guard, I believe, moved up through the ranks, and is a former school teacher and a former coach. I think he might even does he still coach American football? And given how how he comes across when I've seen him interviewed, I've thought he's like really folksy, really down to earth, really great guy, has really good progressive values, interestingly. But I just didn't see him as a vice president. I was thinking you would have to have someone like, I don't mean serious. I don't know if serious is the right word, actually. But yeah, I looked at someone like Mark Kelly and thought, right, he's a vice presidential kind of guy. But they've chosen Tim Walz. And I think I now understand why, actually, for a whole bunch of reasons. Hopefully, we'll express those reasons. I'll express those reasons as we go through the videos to why this might actually be the best choice. So remember, really, you were looking at most people were saying it was between three people. Josh Shapiro, who was like the favorite. Now, he's a Jewish governor from Pennsylvania he's very good rhetorically, quite young. And that might have worked against him. They might have wanted to go for someone with a bit more aged experience in that sense. But he's been a successful politician. Josh Shapiro is very good rhetorically. But being Jewish, that might have there was talk about that being an issue with regard to the Israel-Gaza conflict. And indeed, he had been attacked on that already by Republicans. They've been gearing up and releasing, not quite attack ads, but people in public have been attacking Josh Shapiro, going back into his past and looking at things he had said. To be perfectly frank, his positions on Israel-Gaza conflict, I think, are fairly decent, fairly middle of the road. He finds Netanyahu's right-wing administration incredibly reprehensible. So he's not someone who's going to be like super supportive of what Israel is doing. But I don't know whether that was just something that was too much of a risk, considering they need to try and get their left wing on board in Democratic support, and those further to the right in the party, try and unify people. Maybe that was the thinking there with Josh Shapiro. You had Mark Kelly, the Arizona senator, who might have brought Arizona along. Had Josh Shapiro, Pennsylvania, it's super important. Mark Kelly, Arizona, super important. He would have been strong on immigration. I think a more serious person. His wife had been, there's an attempted assassination on her life, Gabby Giffords, back in 2011, was it? And gun control was a big thing for him. And as I say, immigration and foreign policy. And I was going for him because for being serious, for being a veteran, former astronaut, former Navy captain, been helping, I think, train Ukrainian F-16 pilots, or involved in that process to some degree. So he was really strong in Ukraine. I think would have been very good, certainly with conflicts in terms of foreign policy. Pete Buttigieg, who I think is brilliant, and a lot of people's, very popular. He's come across so well on things like Fox News. He's certainly one for the future, I think, because he's an openly gay man. He's a veteran himself. Has two children, I think adopted children, with his husband. And that might have been too, a woman of color as president and vice president, a gay man. But you've got to weigh all these things up. And Tim Walz, for me, was just, as I say, just a bit too folksy, not quite vice presidential enough. But they've obviously gone with him. And as I say, I think this is actually quite a good choice now. So let's just read a little bit up on him. Walz's first round, Walz first ran for office in 2006 in a Republican-leaning congressional district, upsetting the incumbent. He kept the seat until he won the Minnesota governorship in 2018, then again in 2022. So he's popular in his state of Minnesota. Under his leadership, the state has seen significant progressive legislative wins in recent years, including universal school meals, legalized marijuana, abortion protections, and gun control measures. Before he entered public office, he was a school teacher in Mankato, Minnesota, teaching geography to high school students. He also served in the Army, National Guard for 24 years. In an Instagram post announcing the pick, Harris said, quote, "One of the things that stood out to me about Tim is how his convictions on fighting for middle-class families run deep. It's personal." So I think what they've got here is someone who is very strong on what the right might call progressive ideals, but they're actually popular policies across the middle class in US, right? And this is exactly one of the main demographics they're going to be gunning for, the Democrats. And so in those independents in the middle, yeah, you're going to get your Democrats always voted Democrat, and no, you're not going to get your MAGA Republicans. Okay, forget those two. So let's look at the middle ground, those suburban swing voters, suburban mums, right? That is an important demographic, young people and young families. And he is big on policies. He's successful with those policies in Minnesota concerning the aforementioned free school meals, so on and so forth. So really, really important. Okay, so you can see that Kamala Harris is thinking that is an important aspect. So one of the things that stood out for me was convictions in fighting for middle-class families. Okay, she cited his upbringing in Nebraska and how after his father's death to cancer, his family relied on Social Security survivor benefits to make ends meet. He used the GI Bill to attend college. He coached high school football and advised the high school's gay-straight alliance. His background is impressive in its own right, but also informs his governing, she said. Minnesota Democrats' legislative record played into her choice. She noted a law that constitutionally protects access to abortion and one requiring universal background checks for gun purchases. Quote, "But what impressed me most about Tim is his deep commitment to his family," she added. "We are going to build a great partnership. We are going to build a great team. We are going to win this election." So this is really important. What my opinion about Tim Walz is, it's an attempt to pull the rug out from under Republicans who will want to criticize him. So being such a strong family man, being a former teacher, a coach of a football team, like American football team, and a veteran. These are things that are like to die for. He's a public servant who has gone above and beyond, and he's been incredibly important in the communities he's worked in, and has brought those communities together and the districts for which he has governed as well. And I just think that means it's going to be more difficult for people to find criticism of him. Walz posted a short statement on Twitter on Tuesday saying, "Vice President Harris is showing us the politics of what's possible. It reminds me a bit of the first day of school," he said. His Midwesterner dad charm and straight talk propelled him to the list as a potential vice presidential pick, though as a head of the Democratic Governors Association, he has been stumping for Biden and Harris for the past year. It was his simple retort against Trump and his allies that caught national Democrats' attention most. He called them weird. So that whole weird thing came from him originally. His clips on TV shows went viral, showing him pushing back on Republicans' weird behavior, while showcasing a list of what he accomplished as a Democratic governor and how Democrats would govern if they win the White House again. Walz explained in a TV interview why he started calling Trump weird. "It's true that Trump's policy would put women's lives on the line, and that he's a threat to constitutional values," Walz said. But he's also on the campaign trail, quote, "talking about Hannibal Lecter and shocking sharks and just whatever crazy thing pops into his mind. Have you ever seen the guy laugh? That seems very weird to me. That an adult can go through 6.5 years of being in the public eye. If he has laughed, it's at someone, not with someone. That is weird behavior," Walz said of Trump. I've talked about this at length previously, how the fact that Trump hasn't laughed says so much about him psychologically. It's incredibly revealing, is my opinion. His former colleagues, this is Tim Walz, praised his ability to connect with those crucial voters in the Rust Belt and to not only explain what's bad about Republicans, but what Democrats would actually do in office. So it's not just about how he's good at critiquing the Republicans, as you've heard, and seeing them as weird and trying to make sense of their claims, and indeed Trump's speeches, but it's about that contrast, isn't it? Well, this is what I've done, and this is what I see the Democrats doing more nationally. Tim Ryan, a former Democratic U.S. representative and Walz's friend, called to mind a recent clip in which Walz mentioned that Minnesota ranked in the top 3 for happiest states in the nation. Quote, "Isn't that really the goal here, for some joy?" When he mentioned that, I was like, dang, man, that's really good. That's really good, because it gets us out of the political space and into the human being space. This is also super important. I talked about this previously in terms of geopolitics in general, about how as nations, we should be looking at the countries that have the highest um, uh, GDP, the best kind of tax ratios, the best education. Okay, for me, those are all ways of moving towards getting the greatest happiness. And we need to look at the countries that have the highest happiness in maybe the the annual happiness index, where the Nordic states often come out on top. Now, there are going to be elements of those countries that are aspects of their geography that you can't kind of replicate, and their population sizes, etc. But those kind of policies that maintain those nations at the top of the list, those are the policies we should be borrowing, that we should be copying, because surely our intention should be for as many of our citizens to be as happy as possible. Now, you can talk about education, and you can talk about, I don't want to get too philosophical here, but happiness is a non-derivative value currency, which means you can't derive it any further. You don't say, why are you happy? Because it's good. Why is it good? Because it's just self-evident. So it's called an axiom. It's self-evidently good that happiness, to be happy. Whereas you can say, why do you want education? And you can derive that further. Why do you want GDP? Why do you want high tax income to get a welfare state? Why do you want a good welfare state to get people healthier? Why do you want people healthier? And all of those because derive down to happiness. So when you've got, this is actually super interesting, that when you've got a governor who knows that his state is one of the happiest in the US, then actually that's important, because that should be what all politics is about. It should be what all politics is striving for. But it kind of gets lost in the long weeds, and you concentrate on these other things as not means to an end, but an end in and of themselves. We want a GDP. We want really high GDP. Why? Because we get loads of money. Why? Because we want loads of money. Why do we want loads of money? Because I want to be rich. Why do you want to be rich? Because I want to be rich. Why do you want to be rich? Because I want to be rich. No. Why do you want to be rich? Because that will hopefully lead to a greater ability to stay healthy and have a longevity that and where we can fulfill our lives, and it gives us greater ability to do the things that really matter. Anyway, that's my philosophical aside there. Right, let's go and look a little bit more at Walz. So, fun fact: Tim Walz is the highest-ranking soldier to ever serve in Congress. So, as a soldier, so Mark Hartling, who's involved in Ukraine war analysis, says as a former. He was in charge of European forces and former Bradley commander. Anyway, many followers not familiar with the military asking me, so what's the big deal about a command sergeant major? Walz joined at 18 as a private, rose through the NCO sergeant ranks, each requiring extreme competence at increasingly demanding jobs with more people and responsibility at every rank. When you reach master sergeant, you are selected to serve as a first sergeant 1SG of a unit. If you're good enough, then the 1S first sergeants compete for selection to sergeant major. Only the best sergeant majors are selected for command sergeant major (CSM) billets. CSMs serve as a senior enlisted person in the unit and the advisor to commanders at battalion and above. Having served with dozens of CSMs as my unit and command battle buddy, I will attest that they were all awesome. They know what they're doing. They uphold standards. They speak their minds to all ranks, private to generals. They're not afraid of getting bad news because they know how to fix things when they go wrong, and they serve the command, their commander, and their soldiers with a selfless integrity and a complete dedication. During social events and informal occasions, they're usually a whole bunch of fun, and they always have great stories, but they're always professional. So those are my thoughts on Command Sergeants Major. While I don't know the details of Governor Tim Walz's career wearing the cloth of our country, just the fact about the fact that he volunteered to serve and wore the CSM rank tells me a lot about him. Which is really interesting. That was in answer to Glenn Kirshner saying, I like and I'm inspired by Tim Walz, Kamala Harris's VP pick. He has military experience as a sergeant NCO. Those of us who served know that it's the NCOs that make it all work. He was a HS social studies teacher and high school and football coach. He's direct, plain spoken, and an honest, honourable man. That's the opinion there. Now, some of the news coming out, lots of stuff to say. Goodness me. Okay, Trump to participate in major interview with Elon Musk. So he's going to appear, Tim Walz, in Philadelphia to campaign at a rally with Kamala Harris. Lots of people coming out and sort of endorsing him or giving him giving him props. And it's also interesting to note that, here it is, Mike Johnson, the Republican House Speaker, joined other members of his party in condemning Tim Walz as, quote, a progressive running mate who has voiced support for socialism. So this is how the Republicans are going to answer this. They're going to see him as progressive because he does have some progressive values and policies, but those policies are actually the sorts of policies that are universally popular, or far more universally popular than you might think from just being labelled sort of progressive policies. Quote, no amount of spin from the campaign or the media can distract from the objective facts and the disastrous records of Harris and Walz, Johnson said in a statement, which is interesting because they're clearly not disastrous records from Tim Walz, both as a lawmaker then governor, and having one of the happiest states in the country is clearly not the case. So this is the spin here appears to be coming from Mike Johnson instead. Anyway, I look forward to highlighting the vast differences between the most radical left-wing ticket, and this is what they're going to do. It's all about calling them radical and left-wing and liberal, as if that's definitely a bad thing. In American history and the America First agenda that President Trump and JD Vance are fighting for every day. Democrats have rejected the characterization of Walz, with Nancy Pelosi telling MSNBC this morning he's right down the middle. He's a heartland of America Democrat, and I think that's going to be super important. Who gets to win that narrative is going to be where it's at the moment. So the sorts of things. So this is Occupy Democrats, a real left wing sorts. But I just wanted to give you an idea of what people on the left are saying about Tim Walz to see why he's liked by them. So this get to know Tim Walz, Kamala's choice for vice president. It was a high school social studies teacher and football coach in a small Minnesota town, 24 years in National Guard, lowered the cost of insulin to $35 a month, cut taxes for working families, signed paid family leave into law for Minnesota families, protected women's rights to choose, eliminated junk fees, passed free school lunches for all. In other words, these are things that are generally popular amongst the majority of the population. So what I think is really important for the Harris campaign is that I think because of that middle class American agenda and appeal, I think it's going to be hard to criticize him. So can't wait to, says the Lincoln Project. So these are not anti-Trump Republicans. Can't wait to watch MAGA twist themselves into pretzel trying to convince America that this guy is evil. And here he is. All of these children.
Ow! My eyes! And my legs hurt too.
And that's the sort of thing that could do a good job for him. That's you don't have to work for that kind of footage. That's out there, and it's very appealing. Now, this is what John Lovett said on Pod Save America. I actually played some of this some weeks ago to give you an idea of who Tim Walz was. But anyway, this is doing the rounds again because this does give you a sense of who Tim Walz is.
So let's say you're on a debate stage with, say, JD Vance, and he accuses you of being a big government liberal who's attacking our families, making life worse for our families, doesn't share our values, doesn't care about families like yours. What do you say to him?
Yeah, well, first of all, it was up to him. I wouldn't have a family because of IVF and the things that we need to do reproductive. My kids were born through that that way. And also, I make sure that I'm the guys and our folks are investing in prenatal care. We're the ones that are there for universal pre-K. We're the ones that are providing school meals at this. I'm not going to back down one bit on this whole family values thing, and it's us. That construct that he's putting out there is absolutely untrue. We're making it more affordable to have children by having paid family and medical leave so that you can go home when your kids are sick and take care of them. Or if you're a dad, I don't have to go right back to work 5 days later after my wife had a C-section because our insurance wouldn't pay for it. We're boosting those things up. There's nothing pro-family other than having women be incubators for their vision of this. Once again, it's weird. I don't want J.D. Vance talking about my family. I certainly don't want him talking about my daughter or my wife. It's none of his damn business. But I said the one thing is we need to talk about how we've invested in families. We have the most generous child tax credit, and it's what Vice President Harris is proposing for the country. People are poor because they don't have money. And when kids don't have the money on the front end, all of the things that a chain reaction of can't learn, can't go on. So I'll challenge him on that. Where is J.D. Vance's pro-family? He's forcing people to not be able to have medical care if they have a bad pregnancy or something. We need to stand in front of that. And again, you don't need me to give a sermon, but try and live one. Try and be decent. Try and help your neighbors. Try and invest in those kids.
So that is incredibly powerful, I think. Like if you are trying to get that middle ground here, if you're trying to, of which in that demographic you've got young families and you've got mums from suburban middle class America, and you're also trying to mobilize people who weren't going to be bothered to vote for Biden but to now come out and vote, and so all those demographics exist in the independents, also existing in the Democratic electorate, but are not so enthused. You're going to be watching like Kamala Harris saying it for as a woman and a person of color, and you're going to be watching what Tim Walz says, standing up for families and saying all the right things, in my opinion, that are going to work. And then you've got JD Vance saying like bonkers things and calling people childless cat ladies and alienating demographics, and these people are bringing on demographics. So I think Tim Walz might end up being a really, really good choice. Now, it's interesting that he's attracted a quite universal support. So you've had his Senator Joe Manchin, who sits right to the right of the Democratic Party, although he's to the point where he's not running again as a senator in Virginia, and he's also left the Democratic Party. He's now saying, my friend Governor Tim Walz will bring normality back to the most chaotic political environment that most of us have ever seen. So he's got the right wing of the Democrats supporting him, it appears, at least as far as Joe Manchin is concerned. Then you've got Adam Kinzinger, former Republican lawmaker, kind of never Trumper, saying, I served for years with Governor Tim Walz in the House. We always got along well, and when we would argue issues, it was always with respect. He will make a great VP for Kamala Harris. And now you've got certain Republicans saying this. Here you've got the statement from former Maryland governor and Republican U.S. Senate candidate Larry Hogan. Quote, I want to extend my congratulations to Governor Walz on being selected as a Democratic vice presidential nominee. We had the chance to work together as fellow governors, and while we came from different parties, I've always appreciated his dedication to public service. I believe we need more governors at the national level because governors have to actually get stuff done. I wish Tim and his family well in the campaign ahead. And you've got Cenk Uygur here, who is from the Young Turks, which is a left-wing progressive media site. So here's a guy here's out of Cenk Uygur stood actually for a progressive candidate, I think in New York. He didn't succeed, but these guys, Anna Kasparian and Cenk Uygur and John Iadarola, people like them, they're always talking up, your progressive candidates. He's saying, holy shit, I can't believe she picked Tim Walz. She's going to win. That's a bold choice. Democrats are never bold. The attitude is even more important than the pick, even though the pick is excellent. If she's the the type who picks Waltz, she might even try to get things done. So from a progressive point of view, this is seen as a really good pick as well. So as Cenk Uygur says, one of the reasons this Democratic ticket will win is because Republicans are going to make the mistake of attacking Waltz's progressive bills. And this is what I was saying earlier, all of which are intensely popular. Please attack us on paid family leave. Please attack us on abortion rights. Please attack us on red flag laws. Please attack us on free school lunches, so on and so on and so forth. You know, if that's where the Republicans want to draw the battle lines, then Cenk Uygur says this is only going to end well for the Democrats. Now, Josiah from Pondering Politics says Waltz is so well liked by his party that he not only has the public endorsements of Bernie and AOC, so in your left of the party, or Bernie's caucuses with the Democrats, he's not actually a Democrat, but everyone thinks he is. But even a centrist pain in the ass like Joe Manchin. So that's just what I was saying before. The election's not over. We can still lose, but we should all feel good about this. And this is talking about Senator Joe Manchin's endorsement of Tim Walz here, which you can read that in all its fullness there. Now, again, you know, when you look at videos like this, and I may end up having to cut this out if it gets picked up for, I don't know, it might get picked up for the music here as a copyright infringement. So if this video suddenly doesn't exist, I've had to move on to the next part and cut it out. But this is a kind of video that, again, like the kids hugging Tim Walz earlier, this is a sort of video that is going to be so like positive. This is your like. Compare your man here to JD Vance, right? Compare this video to JD Vance and think who you would rather be campaigning. So that's okay. Avowedly, like I wouldn't call it propaganda, but you know, that's from his point of view. That's showing him in all his glory, type thing. But that's a difficult ticket to beat, I think, when you're having Trump and JD Vance against Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. I think this is eminently winnable, and I'm coming round to that Tim Walz might just be that kind of everyman choice. That I mean, I always think. I was previously thinking, you know, imagining him at the Munich Security Conference. Is he the right guy for that? Or, you know, what's his position here? But, you know, he's a former National Guardsman for 24 years. You know, he will know, he will understand military to some degree. And foreign diplomacy, I don't know, but, you know, you have teams around you to help you with that. It's interesting. So talking about Ukraine, presumptive Democratic presidential candidate and current US Vice President Kamala Harris has selected Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, an outspoken Ukraine supporter, as her running mate for the US presidential election. So that's Kyiv Independent being happy with this. So let's see if there's anything else. Yeah. So Walz met virtually with Zelensky, so President of Ukraine, in April 2023 for a conversation organized by the National Governors Association, the same group that hosted Zelensky in Utah following the NATO summit in July. Quote, "It was an honor to hear from President Zelensky firsthand and offer him our unwavering support," Walz said in a statement following the April meeting. "Minnesota is a proud home to many Ukrainian families, and we will continue to welcome and support Ukrainian refugees in our state." When a German Marshall Fund visited Minnesota as part of their Whistle Stops for Ukraine tour, rallying support for Ukraine in the country's center, Walz was there. In February, the Minnesota governor established an agricultural partnership between Minnesota and Ukraine's northern Chernihiv Oblast during a meeting with Oksana Makarova, the Ukrainian ambassador. Quote, "Once we drive the Russians out, we will have some cooperation," Walz said, discussing the agricultural partnership. "It's really important showing of friendship and a real important showing of ties." In addition to being an agricultural state, Minnesota hosts facilities of two major defense companies, facility of aerospace and defense company Northrop Grumman, who are actually in Ukraine working at the moment, has helped produce drones and ammunition for the war-torn country. British multinational aerospace defense and information security company BAE Systems facility in the state has also helped produce howitzer parts provided to Ukraine. Jonathan Katz, a national security expert in the Brookings Institute, said what is arguably more notable than the weapons production is Walz's welcoming of Ukrainian refugees to Minnesota, given the passionate hostility towards US support for Ukraine displayed by Walz's future disputant JD Vance. Any pick by Harris would have satisfied advocates for Ukraine comparatively. So yeah, Kelly, Shapiro, and Buttigieg even, and Walz, strong supporters of Ukraine, right? Yeah. So John Herbst, the former US ambassador to Ukraine, said selecting Walz was a mistake, not necessarily for Ukraine, but for Harris's hopes of reaching moderate voters. As both Harris and Donald Trump need to reach moderate voters, Herbst finds it perplexing they've both opted for non-moderate running mates. So this is to say that Walz is actually leaning more on the progressive side, and JD Vance is leaning more on the totally wingnut MAGA side. And so someone here, a third-party onlooker, is saying, I'm quite surprised they've both gone in that direction. But I think for all the reasons said before, Walz isn't quite that that progressive candidate that I think the Republicans will try and paint him as being. Doug Klain, a policy analyst in Washington for Raison for Ukraine, said Walz's biggest asset to Harris's ticket is domestic, with his ability to bridge the urban-rural divide. Quote, "As a veteran, he's uniquely positioned to speak credibly to Americans on the necessity of American involvement in Europe," Klain said. "Governor Walz has a strong track record on Ukraine, and he's uniquely well-positioned, thanks to the background, to be a serious advocate of helping Ukraine win." So I think that there's an awful lot to be said about Tim Walz with regard to Ukraine, as well as all of those domestic policies. So actually, he really could be a very sensible pick here. Jake Bro says Tim Walz supports Ukraine and opposes Russia. And this is coming from Governor Tim Walz back in 2022, signing a bill here. Says, "I'm proud to sign a bill today to end state investments and contracts in Russia and Belarus. Minnesota does not tolerate the continued illegal aggression against Ukraine." So strong there. And in fact, Russia is reacting to this. As Jack's House says, the Vatniks are pissed, so prepare for a ton of anti-Walz propaganda that will originate from Russia, and MAGA will scarf it up and regurgitate it here. So Sputnik, a Russian propaganda site, says Kamala Harris chooses Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. What is known about him: after the start of Russia's special military operation in 2022, Walz signed a law requiring the state of Minnesota to terminate all government's contracts with Russian organizations. He also met with Zelensky in April 2023 over a video call, offering unwavering support. So Sputnik is already, as you would expect, going to start saying, well, these are things, these are his positions against Russia, but you're going to no doubt start seeing some pretty spurious claims about him that, if you check the provenance of those claims, you could predict that many of them will come from Russia. So that is basically where we're at. A few other things concerning the the election at the moment, just to throw on the end of this. John Voight, so the actor John Voight, from all the great films like Anaconda and other more prominent roles than that. John Voight is a very famous Republican, or he's famously very Republican. Here's a video of him supporting Trump.
The war of our life.
Which is interesting because the Democrats are the ones that often get your Hollywood, your George Clooney's, Brad Pitt's, and et cetera, coming out and doing things that are far more democratic. I think you're more likely to see actors and Hollywood to be on the side of the Democrats. Occasionally, Clint Eastwood and here John Voight, you'll get some who come out, but they're few and far between. Thingy Woods, wasn't he? He's one, and Kevin Sorbo, and some of these like lesser known actors as well. But John Voight, I could play you this. It's minute 35, but this is pretty much exactly what he says. This sounds like it's an interpretation from a liberal saying, but he pretty much says all of these things. John Voight says Obama is committing a war crime by controlling, quote, cackling hyena Harris. The left wants to steal your children and make them all trans. Trump is a messiah, and everyone who votes for Harris will commit the worst crime in human history, and God will punish us. Weird. He literally says that stuff. And so when you go back to this idea of Tim Walz saying these guys are just a little bit weird, and that's caught gained a lot of traction, that it does seem the case. I mean, they can't stop saying things that are just a bit too out there and just trying to cackling hyena. Like, just try and critique them on policy and substance in a refined way, rather than. I mean, this sounds like John Voight is just going down the MAGA Trump direction, route there to how to campaign. And then I just don't get this. Trump praises Venezuela's dictator, saying he's made the country very safe. It's like you've had years and years of the US across the board being anti-Venezuela because Venezuela being like this socialist country and they've had a socialist dictatorship in Maduro. And surely the line for Trump and any Republican is, yeah, Venezuela bad. Don't give them any credence there. And now you've got Trump who was like, well, I was nice to Bolsonaro. I was nice to Orban. I was nice to Putin. I was nice to Xi Jinping. I was nice to Kim Jong-un. So, why not be nice to Maduro as well? So former President Donald Trump spoke with a controversial stream with Adam Ross on Monday and offered an eyebrow-raising reply when asked to weigh in on the ongoing turmoil in Venezuela following the election that many observers, including US, say was stolen. What do you think about what's going on in Venezuela, the whole situation out there? Ross asked. Well, I know it very well, and Venezuela is right now being run by a dictator. We were enemies with Venezuela, Trump replied, adding Venezuela was going to collapse and people could have gone back to Venezuela. They're in our country now. They've released tremendous numbers of criminals into our country. If you look at Caracas, it was known for being a very dangerous city, and now it's very safe. In fact, the next interview we'll doing it in Caracas, Venezuela, because it's safer than many of our cities. Notably, Venezuela has the highest crime rate in the world, according to the Global Organized Crime Index. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro declared himself the winner of the election despite many vote tallies appearing to show the opposition actually won the vote, so on and so forth. So what you've got is Trump saying stuff that, and you can sort of see what he's trying to say here, which is like, we're really anti-immigration and all the criminals, because, immigrants are always just criminals and rapists and this and that and murderers, and they all come across the border. And we've had all the criminals across from Venezuela. And it's now one of the safest places. And and that's not the case. I mean, it's massively high crime rates, the highest in the world. And it's just, of course, what he says, is not going to do him any favors, even if it is, in the way that this headline is written, is not so much about praising the dictator, but making, I think, a statement on immigration. But there you go. As Republican voters against Trump says it, Donald Trump, Venezuela is right now being run by a dictator. If you look at Caracas, it was known for being a very dangerous city, and it's now very safe. It's safer than many of our cities. And I would think if I was a Republican, I would interpret that as a statement on immigration and not a statement of pro-Maduro. But there you go. He does praise dictators for being able to do things, though, without any comeuppance, and that line would fit very well in with his previous statements on dictators in general. So, Trump doesn't help himself by not being clear enough and just praising dictators too many times. I like this. So Lincoln Project saying Donald's already admitted defeat. Trump-Vance's statement, so the Trump-Vance campaign statement on Walz being selected is like, Tim Walz will be the worst vice president in history. It's not would be, which is a modal verb, a word that gives you an idea of, if this was the case, then this would be the outcome. It's like, no, he will be the worst he will be. And I know it's meant as a will, but just again, words mean an awful lot, and I'll just be a little sharper. Anyway, so we have now also learned that Trump is not visiting any battleground states this week. Instead, he's sending JD Vance to chase after Vice President Harris.
Trump is not visiting any battleground states this week. Instead, he's sending JD Vance to chase after Vice President Harris, holding rallies on the same day as her in every state that she's visiting, starting today with Pennsylvania.
Now, the problem there is that JD Vance is not very good at holding rallies. He's completely lacking charisma. And we've seen that Kamala Harris's rallies appear to be far more enthusiastically received than Trump's rallies himself. And Trump is better rhetorically than Vance, although Trump, I think, these days is glitching and going off on these long rambles that don't really add much. Nothing of substance anyway. So, I think it's quite bizarre that he's not doing himself. Trump is not doing those battleground state rallies. Now, another challenge for the Republicans here happening now. Arizona Republicans endorse Vice President Harris and slam Trump for his attacks on democracy. GOP leaders will form a new advisory committee to help the Harris for Arizona campaign reach Republicans who will reject MAGA from now until November. And the problem for Republicans is not a problem that Democrats are suffering at the moment, which is that they are divided. There are many people who are anti-MAGA Republicans who are never Trumpers. They don't have a home. Now, they could vote for a third party, but then Kennedy looks a bit bonkers and pretty much MAGA himself. What if you're serious about foreign policy? What if you're serious about Ukraine? Where do you go? Well, actually, it seems like the Democrats are the only home for you, or not voting and spoiling your ballot, or writing in a name, or whatever. And so there are these movements of Republicans in different places, and sometimes battleground states that are really important, that are mobilizing the Republican never Trumper vote to vote for Harris. And I think this is yet another challenge for the Republicans. And just finally, just beware, as I say all the time, of trolls, Russian trolls that are active. Totally authentic, pro-Putin and by anti-Biden accounts, says Darth Putin. Now, here with the same picture and the same name, but actually all of these are 6 different handles. I don't know if this is Leslie Bless or Les Libelous. Les Libelous, yeah, probably Les Libelous. Les Libelous 21, Les Libelous 16, Les Libelous 544, Les Libelous _ Les Libelous 12. And there you go, just creating all of these accounts. You can do that in an automated fashion very easily. Create all these accounts and send out all these messages and flood the information spaces with pro-Russia, in this case, anti-Democrat messaging. Anyway, those are my views on Tim Walz. I've come around to think actually it probably is quite a sensible choice, because I just think so. My conclusion would be it's easier for Republicans to attack Josh Shapiro, I think, and also have Democrats attack Josh Shapiro. So that's Josh Shapiro's problem was, and I said this before, it was the Israel-Gaza and things he's previously said on that, and that being able to be attacked possibly with more consequence. So if the Republicans attack Tim Walz on his progressive ideals, and those are really popular policies, then that is a bit of a firing a blank But if they attack Josh Shapiro on things that can divide the Democrats over support, there are people that have come out and said, I don't like Josh Shapiro, even though they don't necessarily understand his views. I don't think he has too many problematic views on the Israel-Gaza conflict. But there are those in the Democratic Party that do, and they can be manipulated by attacks from the Republicans in a way that I don't think Democrats will be manipulated by attacks on Tim Walz. So I think that is interesting there. Mark Kelly, I don't know. So also you've got to remember there are some really important things, which is personal chemistry. It looks like Tim Walz is a really nice guy, just a decent human being. And I think, if I'm correct in saying, he's actually worked before with Kamala Harris. So with the governor, being on that governor committee thing, a National Governors Association, is it? And also working previously, I think he was at a number of rallies with her. Was it last year or something as a vice president, as she was vice president? And I think he really impressed her then. So anyway, there is a lot to be said about personal relationships between people, and all these other considerations about foreign policy and rhetoric and being comfortable debating, and how does he sound on the stage, and how will he be against someone like JD Vance one-to-one, and so on and so forth. You put all of these things together, and Tim Walz might not just be a safer bet, but might actually bring more to the ticket. Now, whether he brings the voters from up around his geographical area, you need those Pennsylvania voters, you need Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, you need Arizona. I don't know. There are still many variables here and other things to consider, but I'm coming around to think he probably is a pretty good choice. Anyway, that's enough from me babbling on. Really appreciate you listening to me. I need to go and get back to the A swimming pool. Take care. Speak soon.